Gun violence has become a public health crisis, both across the country and here in Oregon.
You know, we average over 500 deaths from firearms each year in our state.
And that's why OHSU researchers hope their findings help stop the shootings. Plus, the city of Portland just lost nearly $1.5 million, all thanks to a cyber breach. And it took weeks for the city to even notice the money was gone. And later, a look back at the standoff involving a tiny town on the state line.
It may be years before the people of Pine Creek know whether they live in Oregon or California.
Here's the story. Hey there, I'm Ashley Korsland. Welcome to The Story. Pat is off for the next couple days, so I will be your host. All the ways to get in touch with us are right at the bottom of your screen. You can email us. The address there is thestory@kgw.com. You can use the hashtag TheStoryKGW on Twitter, or just leave us an old-fashioned voicemail. You can call our number 503-226-5090. All right, let's get to our big story. Gun violence in Oregon and across the country is in the spotlight yet again after recent mass shootings. As Christine Pedawanich found out, there are people who have dedicated themselves to understanding the problem and hopefully finding solutions.
I spoke with an injury prevention researcher at OHSU, and part of what she and her team looks at is gun violence and ways to reduce it across Oregon. Here at OHSU and the Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Portland, researchers are studying gun violence through the lens of public health.
We're looking at all gun injuries treated in emergency departments and urgent care centers across the state. And we're also looking at firearm-related deaths across the state, and we're evaluating those for patterns. I'm a professor of public health at the OHSU and PSU School of Public Health.
Dr. Kathleen Carlson and her team got funding for gun violence research from the CDC a couple years ago after Congress appropriated $25 million for it.
That was a new CDC source of funding that went out to several states around the country, ours included.
It's a big deal, especially, she says, since funding for gun violence research was restricted for many years.
The NRA viewed this as a way to publicly fund research that supported gun control. And so they worked with Congress to change the budget appropriation to the CDC. If funding goes to gun violence research, then the CDC will lose its entire budget for injury and violence prevention. So this totally stopped gun research.
But now she says things are starting to change. So what has her team learned so far? Oregon averages over 500 gun deaths each year. About 80% of them are suicides, and there are also a lot of unintentional injuries.
And what we've seen in our VA data, we've seen that any treatment for a firearm injury that was non-fatal is strongly associated with a subsequent death from a firearm, most commonly suicide.
Carlson says they're thinking of ways to intervene at the hospital level when people come in, but they're also looking at possible changes at the community level to reduce gun violence. One idea, using environmental design.
On the national level, what we've seen evaluated robustly is the use of greening initiatives, which is taking vacant lots, greening those vacant lots, reducing urban blight or vacant buildings.
After so much gun violence in our communities, Carlson says it's not inevitable. We can do something about it, and it starts with understanding the problem.
But it's not hopeless. There are myriad ways to evaluate this and get a handle on it.
She likened it to advancements to car and road safety over the years. The same can be true with guns and gun violence, balancing safety and freedoms.
Gun injury and gun violence is not inevitable. There are solutions, there are patterns that we can evaluate, and that means that there are solutions and ways to prevent it.
And Dr. Carlson says we need to get rid of the idea that it's a gun rights versus gun control issue because, in fact, there's a lot of room in the middle, and if we can just get there, we'll have a better chance at finding a viable solution. Christine Pedawanich, KGW News.
And if you or someone you know is in crisis, the Suicide Prevention Hotline is available 24 hours a day. The number is there on your screen. It's 1-800-273-8255. Well, a big part of the recent conversation about guns focuses on AR-15 style rifles. That's because those are commonly used in mass shootings, including the one at an elementary school in Uvalde, Texas. Earlier this afternoon, President Biden called for a ban on assault weapons like those. Last night on The Story, we talked to a trauma surgeon at OHSU about how the damage those guns cause is much worse than handguns. If you missed what he said, we want to replay a portion of it, but a warning, his descriptions are pretty graphic.
Those bullets from a high-powered rifle have a velocity of somewhere around 3,000 feet per second, which can impart massive amounts of tissue injury to the human body. They will frequently go through the human body, and as they travel through the body, they'll destroy all the organs in the region of where they're traveling. And that's really due to the kinetic energy that those bullets impart. So any centrally fired weapon, if it's hit anywhere in the central portion of the body, will blow a huge hole in a human being, particularly the exit wound, and it'll almost always be lethal. Gunshot wounds to the head with high-powered rifles are almost 100% lethal without personal protective equipment.
Dr. Schrader there says those types of weapons are not really being used in Portland's current gun violence crisis, and that means more patients can potentially be saved, but he is worried about that changing.
The vast majority of the injuries here in Portland are with low velocity handguns. I have seen in my 20-year career here in Portland, I've seen 2 or 3 that have been shot with high velocity weapons. So very small numbers. The message I have for people in the Portland area, don't let people own assault type rifles. This will make our city unsafe. It will be a much less good place to live. I think that it's appropriate to have a handgun to protect yourself, but we should not have assault rifles on the street because they will likely get into the wrong people's hands, and we are going to have mass killings on our hands that are going to be devastating to our community.
Now, Oregon, by the way, does not have a ban on assault weapons, but a group is collecting signatures to try and get a proposed ban on the November ballot. 7 other states, including California, do have similar bans. Washington state lawmakers are also considering one right now. Well, let's switch gears from gun crimes to money crimes. Somebody pulled off quite the heist at City Hall. They ripped off $1.4 million from the city of Portland. So far, only a few details have been released about it. So let's bring in investigative reporter Kylie Boshi. And first, Kyle, this wasn't exactly Ocean's 11.
Right, nothing that dramatic. It was a cyber breach. Basically, the city says a hacker got access to a Portland Housing Bureau email account, then diverted payment that was supposed to go to Central City Concern for costs related to a new low-income housing project. A lot of money was lost, though, $1.4 million. It came from the city's general fund, and that's taxpayer money. No idea where all that stolen money ended up or who's behind the heist. Portland Police, the FBI, and U.S. Secret Service, they're all working the case.
Well, Kyle, this happened in late April, so why are we just hearing about it now?
Yeah, good question. The city put out a pretty vague statement on Friday. They've since added just a little bit more information, but aren't answering questions. One thing I'd like to know, what's the extent of this breach? I mean, if they got access to one email, you've got to assume the hackers have access to many others, right? And have there been any other losses that maybe we don't know about?
Yeah, I'd like to know too. And at the end of the day, how does this even happen? I mean, $1.4 million, that's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money. And by all accounts, it's a textbook scam. It's called invoice fraud. Unfortunately, it does happen to government, school districts, businesses big and small. So listen closely because we don't want anyone else to lose money. Basically, here's how it works. A fraudster notifies your company that supplier payment details have changed. They'll email or call saying, hey, we've got a new bank account or new account number for that invoice. The scammers, they trick people by claiming to be a supplier or somebody you do business with. They might even pose as a coworker. And the funds, they're often quickly transferred, so recovering that money becomes extremely difficult. In this case, it may just be a loss for the city and really a big one.
Yeah, this one hurts. Kyle, thanks. A new episode of KGW's true crime podcast, Should Be Alive, is out this week. The podcast examines the 2019 murder of a Vancouver teenager named Nikki Kuhnhausen. Her killer strangled Nikki after finding out that she was transgender during a sexual encounter. In episode 2, you will hear a police interview with the 25-year-old suspect, David Bogdanov. The interview took place 2 months before his arrest and before Nikki's remains were discovered here on Larch Mountain in rural Clark County. During the interview, Bogdanov lied to investigators, claiming he had no idea what happened to Nikki.
So you're the last person to ever see her?
I don't know.
And that's why we wanted to talk to you. After she left with you, no one ever saw her again.
Last I saw of her was when I asked her to get out of the car, and that's it. And that was just right there in the middle of the street.
See, that's not how people disappear. That's not how stuff happens to people. So what do you think happened to her?
I have no idea.
Is she alive?
I don't know.
And you can listen to Should Be Alive wherever you get your podcasts. There are 6 episodes altogether. We will release a new episode each Wednesday throughout the month of June. We also have photos, videos, and much more information about Nikki's case at kgw.com/shouldbealive. Congressman Kurt Schrader was reelected 5 times by Oregon voters. This year, he didn't even make it through the Democratic primary. So what happened?
And then there was a couple of issues that really caught people's attention, like pharmaceuticals. Jamie McLeod Skinner was able to really hook in with that.
When the story continues. Hey, welcome back. Keep sending your questions and your comments to the story at kgw.com or give us a call and leave a voicemail at 503-226-5090. Well, Oregon's primary election was a few weeks ago now, but one of the big congressional races wasn't decided until this week because of those ballot issues in Clackamas County. Jamie McLeod Skinner defeated Congressman Kurt Schrader in the Democratic primary for Oregon's 5th district with about 55% of the vote. Schrader's been in Congress since 2009, which means voters re-elected him 5 times. So what was different this time around? We asked our political analyst Len Bergstein. He says the main factor was redistricting. Oregon's 5th district looks a lot different than it did in the past 10 years. It used to include Salem and parts of the coast. Now it goes from the South Portland metro area all the way to Bend.
Oh, I think it was 80 to 90% of the reason for his loss. I mean, clearly he was not well known in the part of the district that's around Deschutes County. Didn't draw a lot of votes out of that area. She came out of it with 9,700 or 10,000 vote edge that he was never able to recover in the areas that he was most familiar with. So redistricting had the consequence that it's had in a lot of places around the country and will have, is we'll watch where candidates who were familiar in part of the district but unknown in others wound up being at a disadvantage. She, on the other hand, is from the area, ran a couple of times in that area.
Well, Len says that's not the only reason Schrader lost, though. In the past few years, he's broken with his party and voted against stimulus checks, a pandemic relief bill, and a bill to lower prescription drug costs.
He was such a high-profile challenger to Nancy Pelosi. He was such a high visibility challenge to the president's agenda on some issues. And then there was a couple of issues that really caught people's attention, like pharmaceuticals. Jamie McLeod Skinner was able to really hook in with that. Once she was able to kind of connect with people's little bit of skepticism about where Kurt was on the spectrum of a Democratic support, then she was able to drive home a couple of issues that I think led to her success.
So now McLeod Skinner will face Republican Lori Chavez DeRemer in the general election. Len says he thinks it'll be a pretty contentious race.
I think the Republicans will probably take another look at Oregon at the national level. And there may be some money coming in from out of state that might not have come in if Kurt Schrader was in the race. And so there'll be a big challenge for Jamie to, first of all, coalesce the support. She'll have to get the Democrats behind her, unified behind her, and then to make sure that she has got enough resources to be able to withstand what will be probably some outside of the state effort to elect a Republican to this seat.
And yeah, that Republican Chavez DeRemer was the mayor of Happy Valley for 8 years. She's also run for the Oregon State House a few times, but lost. Here's what Len says she has to do to try to win in a district that has more Democratic voters than Republicans.
I think she's first of all going to have to develop a personality and a kind of a narrative. People probably don't know her. She's got a wider electorate to get to. She's probably got a more centrist electorate than she had in a very contested Republican primary with lots of candidates. So she's going to have to broaden her message out and get better known.
Okay, time to check in now with the Clackamas County ballot fiasco. It looks like they may actually pull this thing off. The county's elections office is getting very close to being done with hand counting thousands of their ballots before the primary election has to be certified on June 13th. As of yesterday, officials say they have processed all of the main ballots. They are now working on overseas, military, and precinct committee person ballots. They say they're expecting to be done with that tonight. If you're new to this saga, Clackamas County had to duplicate and hand count tens of thousands of ballots because they were printed with blurry barcodes. Hundreds of county workers then had to drop their main jobs and spend the last 3 weeks doing this day in and day out. Clackamas County Clerk Sherry Hall, the woman in charge of the election, told Oregon Secretary of State Shemia Fagan that she'd have the counting done by today. So even if the Clackamas Elections Office pulls this off, there are still a lot of questions surrounding the way Clerk Sherry Hall dealt with this whole thing. At least one lawmaker, Democratic State Rep Janelle Bynum, is calling for an investigation and legislative oversight into what happened. Hall knew about the blurry barcodes 2 weeks before the election, but didn't put a plan in place to fix the problem until election night. The Secretary of State's office says Hall refused offers of help from the state. Hall is an elected official, so she can't be fired. She can only be recalled. And Secretary Fagan says she will not ask her to resign, at least not right now. Hall, by the way, is up for re-election in November. Her opponent, Catherine McMullen, has been an election supervisor for Multnomah County since 2015, and she's ran voter outreach programs for Clackamas County. But Hall has won every re-election every 4 years since she was elected in 2002, despite several other election mistakes. There have been calls for her to resign, including from the Oregonian, but Hall has not given any indication about what she plans to do. We'll keep you posted. Well, still ahead, we have a piece of history you might not know about, or maybe you've forgotten.
It was a friendly war, but we even sold T-shirts and caps that says, "We know where the border is in New Pine Creek or Cal."
Why the Oregon-California state line became the subject of a huge debate when the story continues. All right, I'll be honest. I know some of you think we focus too much on Portland, and we hear you, I promise. So tonight, we're going to talk about a tiny town on the Oregon-California border. In fact, the exact location of the border became a pretty contentious issue in the 1980s. Let's go into the KGW Vault with John Bartell.
In the far northern reaches of Modoc County, there's a visible divide between the residents in the town of New Pine Creek. But if you attend one of Pastor Palmer's church services, you wouldn't know it.
People are wonderful here.
But if you look back to this 1984 news report, the divide was tearing the town apart.
And it may cause a civil war in this area, because there's some of us are pretty set in our ways about this.
New Pine Creek is a border town. One half is in Oregon, the other is in California. And for a short time, there was a bit of a standoff in the community of 200 people.
It was a friendly war, but we even sold T-shirts and caps that says, "We know where the border is in New Pine Creek or Cal."
Longtime resident and proud Oregonian Edna Schultz says growing up, the state border only caused minor problems like post office mistakes and sales tax complaints. But those minor problems turned into big problems when land managers in Sacramento discovered that the location of the state borderline was in the wrong spot.
It may be years before the people of Pine Creek know whether they live in Oregon or California.
The problem dates back to 1868, when surveyor Daniel Major made a bit of a mistake. Oregon's border was supposed to be a straight line along the 42nd parallel, but because of primitive survey equipment, the border ended up looking like jagged teeth on a saw blade.
The legislature from California decided they wanted the property back.
In reality, both states lost and gained some land because of the crooked line, but the land California claimed to have lost was valuable.
The reason could have a lot to do with offshore mineral rights, oil and gas, that could go to California if the border is changed.
Arguments over the border ultimately ended, and the state line remained the same. As for those mineral rights both states were fighting over, well, it didn't really affect rock hunter Frank Newman one bit.
The electric blue like this color is very rare.
Gold mining and farming brought some of the first settlers to New Pine Creek, but rainbow obsidian is what attracted Frank.
Obsidian is made with the volcano, of course, but it has to be made underneath water.
Because of the area's unique geology, Frank says rainbow obsidian is only found in this region. He's got permits to pick up rocks in both states, and because he knows where to find the obsidian, his roadside rock shop brings in lots of tourists.
And everybody knows me in this town.
Yeah.
I couldn't hide if I tried.
The original town of New Pine Creek was named after the old pine forest and the now dried up creek that ran through the community. When a fire burned the town down in the late 1800s, people on both sides of the state rebuilt and renamed themselves New Pine Creek.
We don't know where the border is. We help each other out, all of us.
Today, the road signs are the only visible divide between the town, but if you stop in and actually meet the people of New Pine Creek, you wouldn't notice a divide at all.
What a great look back in history. Cool people in that town. Okay, keep sending your questions and your comments to the story at kgw.com. We will finish the show right after this. All right, for this week's Hey Help campaign, we are asking you to donate to PDX Saints Love. They help people experiencing homelessness and addiction in Portland. The group puts on community fairs where they offer things like showers, haircuts, clothing, hot food, and other resources. They also provide mentorship to those who want to get off the street. If you would like to help, all you have to do, it's pretty simple. You hold your phone's camera right up to the QR code on your screen, or you can go to kgw.com/heyhelp. Now, this is a micro donation drive, so feel free to give any amount, no matter how small it is, it helps. Well, that's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. The news at 6:30 is next. See you tomorrow.
This is KGW News at 6:30.
We spent hours with hundreds of family members